What happens when a powerful CEO is wrongfully arrested at a luxury car dealership? Victoria Bennett turned humiliation into a game-changing legal battle that rocked an entire industry. Stay tuned to find out how one moment of injustice flipped the script. In a luxurious car dealership, the air hung with the elegance and gleam of high-end sports cars. Amid the gleaming lineup, one vehicle stood out. A metallic silver Aston Martin Vantage, its sleek curves practically inviting every gaze. As the glass doors slid open, a woman named Victoria Bennett entered the space, radiating a confident grace amid the light reflecting off the luxury cars. Behind the front desk stood Blake Thompson, the dealership's owner. As Victoria moved toward the Aston Martin, Blake seemed not to notice her at all, continuing his conversation with another employee, occasionally letting out a smug laugh. Most of the customers in the showroom were well-dressed middle-aged men, exuding sophistication in their tailored suits, often with beautiful young women on their arms. They walked through the space as if they were in an exclusive club, accessible only to the wealthy. Victoria paid no mind to Blake's dismissive attitude. She quietly admired the Aston Martin, her eyes reflecting a passion and determination beyond the surface. She wasn't a typical customer whom Blake could simply assess by appearance alone. But Blake had no idea. He turned to an employee and smirked, his expression subtly mocking Victoria's presence there. Soon, however, Blake's attitude would completely shift as he discovered the identity of Victoria's son, a powerful figure in the business world who would soon arrive to affirm his mother's rightful place in a space where she had been underestimated. Victoria took note of the unspoken rules and attitudes around her, her gaze calm yet resolute. She was no stranger to being judged by appearances and was prepared for any challenge. With a subtle smile, she ran her hand over the Aston Martin's sleek surface, then turned to Blake, her tone both polite and assertive. "Excuse me," she said, her hand gliding along the car's metallic paint. "I'd like to know more about this model." Blake turned around, his piercing blue eyes flicking over Victoria with barely concealed disdain. Despite her elegant attire, he offered her only a faint, mocking smile. "You'd probably feel more comfortable over at the used car lot across town," he replied, each word dripping with cold condescension. "The Aston Martin Vantage here is, after all, the pinnacle of British engineering and extraordinary luxury." Victoria's gaze did not waver, though her body subtly tensed at the blatant disrespect. Her silk dress whispered with her movement, but her voice remained steady, carrying the tone of a woman who had encountered and overcome plenty of people who underestimated her. "I'm well aware of Aston Martin's reputation," she replied, her words deliberate, "and I am particularly interested in the specifications and customization options for this model." Before she had even finished, Blake let out a derisive laugh that echoed throughout the showroom, as if daring anyone to question his authority. He leaned in closer, his smirk widening. "Ma'am, this Aston Martin costs more than most people earn in 5 years. I wouldn't want to waste your time," he sneered, sharing a self-satisfied grin with a colleague, his gaze heavy with implication. Victoria looked him squarely in the eye, unflinching. Her voice, directed not just at Blake but resonating for any customer observing, rang out with unmistakable resolve. "You will be wasting time," she replied coolly, "if you don't show me this car right now." A flicker of confusion crossed Blake's smug expression, and his meticulously polished face betrayed a hint of discomfort. Reluctantly, he stepped closer, forcing a strained smile to maintain composure. But as he encroached on her space, his tone grew icier, laced with a thinly veiled threat. "At Elite Motors, we cater to a certain kind of clientele, those who truly understand the value of class," Blake said coldly, gesturing toward the door with a dismissive wave. "Perhaps you should leave before this becomes uncomfortable for everyone." Victoria straightened, her lithe frame illuminated by the late afternoon light. Her dress glowed in a rich wine hue, exuding elegance but also strength. She lifted her chin slightly, her gaze as sharp as fire. Years of facing prejudice and judgment had taught her when to step back and when to stand her ground. She recalled countless meetings where she had been the only woman, the only person of color, and had fought for respect. Looking at Blake, Victoria decided to take one bold step forward. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," she said, fully aware this would ruffle him and compel him to reveal his true prejudices. She chose her words carefully, setting the stage for Blake to expose his own character. Blake lifted his head arrogantly, his voice dripping with contempt. "I am the owner of this dealership," he replied, puffing out his chest, "and I'm asking you to leave immediately." When Victoria didn't move, Blake's face flushed red from his collar to his hairline, and he grabbed his phone, fingers gripping it tightly. "I'll call the police," he spat out. "We don't need your kind causing trouble here." The last words spilled from Blake's mouth like venom, the polite facade vanishing, replaced by blatant hostility as he escalated the situation. But Victoria remained steady. She stood calmly, her gaze unwavering, though her mind began turning over the potential fallout of Blake's actions. She had faced discrimination before, but never so brazen, so openly. A part of her wanted to reveal her true identity and watch Blake's face as he realized his mistake. But Victoria's sense of reason knew that sometimes the best revenge was letting an adversary self-destruct. A moment later, security arrived, visibly uncomfortable but obedient to Blake's commands, surrounding Victoria. Soon after, 2 police officers entered, their expressions serious. Blake quickly spun a story of a disturbance and aggressive behavior, casting himself as the victim of harassment and a potential scam. Though Victoria calmly explained her side, her words fell on deaf ears. Before she realized it, she felt the cold handcuffs lock around her wrists. The rich wine-colored silk of her dress tightened as her arms were restrained behind her. Blake's smug laughter echoed as she was escorted out by the officers. "Know your place next time," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Victoria held her head high, walking quietly past the curious stares and whispers of the surrounding customers. Though the cuffs bit into her wrists, she showed no sign of pain. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, her dress seemed to glow even brighter, contrasting sharply with the cold sterility of the showroom. As she was led to the police car, a faint smile crossed her lips, a smile that, if Blake had seen it, would have unsettled him. Because Blake had no idea that there were things about Victoria Bennett that could shatter every one of his preconceptions. 25 years ago, she had started as an accounting intern at a small firm, working by day while attending law school at night. Her husband, Marcus, had passed away when their son, Marcus Jr., was only 2, leaving her to raise him alone while pursuing her dreams and carving her path in the financial world. Sitting in the back of the police car, Victoria thought of those early days. She remembered the cramped apartment she and her son had lived in, the nights she'd studied beside his bed as he slept, and every sacrifice she'd made. She thought of the scornful looks, the dismissive words, each one strengthening her resolve. It was this determination and foresight that had helped her transform Bennett Financial Group into one of the foremost investment firms. Today, her client list included sports icons, entertainment moguls, and industry titans who entrusted her with managing their billions. But Victoria's proudest achievement was her son, Marcus Jr., who embodied both her resilience and talent, a fact that Blake Thompson would soon understand all too well after underestimating this woman. Marcus Bennett Jr., a man who inherited his mother's sharp mind and fierce determination, as well as his late father's tall, powerful build, had graduated with honors in law, specializing in corporate and civil rights litigation. Quickly, he had built a reputation in the legal world, renowned for his meticulous preparation and razor-sharp argumentation, making him one of the youngest partners at Preston & Howard, the city's most prestigious law firm. Victoria had raised Marcus with a strong foundation of values, always teaching him about respect, dignity, and the responsibility to stand up for what's right. She showed him how to channel discrimination into a determination to fight for justice, not through anger but with intellect and resolve. Their Sunday dinners often turned into impromptu lessons on business strategy and social equity, as Victoria shared stories from her life, and Marcus absorbed every word. As she sat in the police station's waiting room, Victoria recalled one particular Sunday dinner. It was the night Marcus had just won his first major award for his accomplishments in the courtroom. They had sat on the balcony of her penthouse, the city lights stretching out before them like a vast ocean of possibilities. "Remember, son," she had said, swirling her glass of wine. True power doesn't come from making others feel small. It's about lifting them up, changing the system from within. Marcus had nodded, his eyes filled with admiration and understanding, absorbing a lesson that would define his career. It drove him to fight not only for himself but for meaningful change. Marcus's expertise made him a feared force in the legal field, especially among companies with discriminatory practices. He was known for exposing these injustices with precision, using every line of the law like a scalpel, so much so that his cases became infamous not only for their victories, but for the legal and public pressure they created. But today, as she sat in the cold, sterile space of the police station, Victoria wasn't thinking of success or reputation. She was thinking about justice, about those who had endured injustice without the means to fight back. In that moment, she knew that what she was going through wasn't just an insult, but also a lesson for people like Blake Thompson. As she sat waiting, Victoria's mind was already crafting a plan. She thought about the connections she had built over the years, the alliances with powerful and minority business leaders. She thought of friends in the media who would undoubtedly want to hear how a prominent CEO had been treated at a luxury car dealership. And she imagined the legal strategy she and Marcus would construct to turn this outrage into a catalyst for positive change. 1 week later, Blake Thompson sat in his office at Elite Motors, feeling satisfied as he reviewed the latest sales reports. The incident with that troublesome woman had long faded from his mind, just another day of maintaining the dealership's standards and keeping out those who didn't know their place in the luxury car world. To him, people like Victoria were just empty-handed dreamers who would never be able to afford the gleaming cars he sold, gems he believed only the worthy had the right to own. Suddenly, the door to Blake's office flew open with a jarring sound, pulling him out of his self-satisfied thoughts. An anxious assistant rushed in, holding a newspaper with a bold headline about the incident at his dealership, featuring a photograph of Victoria Bennett and a shocking exposé on the discrimination at Elite Motors. Blake clenched the newspaper, his face paling as he realized that the story was now beyond his control. On the front pages, newspapers and social media alike were filled with news of Victoria Bennett. Not just any customer, but a powerful CEO in finance who had quietly built an empire from the ground up. And now, she was no longer standing alone. She had a formidable legal team and strong backing from her network. In the public's eye, Blake Thompson was no longer the proud dealership owner, but a symbol of bias and injustice. In that very moment, Blake understood that what he'd done to Victoria was more than a mistake. It was the beginning of a downfall that would threaten his entire career. He could feel the force of change, the power that Victoria Bennett and her son had meticulously built over the years. And for the first time in his life, Blake realized what real power was. Not something that made others feel small, but something that could alter the world forever. Blake's intercom buzzed, interrupting his self-satisfied thoughts. "Mr. Thompson," the assistant's voice came through, tinged with an uncertainty Blake had never heard before. "There's a Mr. Bennett here to see you. He says he has an appointment." Blake frowned, unable to recall any appointment, but the name Bennett sparked an uncomfortable memory. Still, he smirked, thinking this was the perfect time to show the confidence that had served him so well over the years. He straightened his tie and sat up. The office door opened, and a man about 6 feet 1 inch stepped inside, dressed in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit that accentuated his physique. His strong, dark skin radiated an air of power, and his professional yet cold smile reminded Blake of a shark that had just spotted its prey. "Mr. Thompson," Marcus Bennett said, extending his hand, his Harvard ring gleaming under the lights. "I believe you met my mother last week, Victoria Bennett, the woman you had arrested when she tried to purchase an Aston Martin." Blake's face went pale, the memory of his actions flooding back in vivid detail. His hand shook as his dazed eyes locked onto the stack of papers Marcus placed on the desk. "This is a legal notice against Elite Motors for discrimination, false imprisonment, and defamation," Marcus said flatly. "We've also filed complaints with the Consumer Protection Bureau and the Civil Rights Commission. My team has gathered witness statements, including some of your regular customers, who are very upset by your behavior." Blake's throat went dry as he scanned the documents in front of him. His eyes widened at the detailed accusations and potential damages. "Surely, there's some misunderstanding here," he stammered, his voice losing all confidence, evaporating like mist under the harsh sunlight. "I completely understand," Marcus smoothly interrupted, casually twirling a platinum bracelet, a gift from his mother when he won his first case. "Understand that you handcuffed and arrested my mother, Victoria Bennett, CEO of Bennett Financial Group, simply for trying to purchase a car at your dealership. I also understand that you laughed as she was led away, and that you violated at least 15 federal and state laws." Marcus paused, each word sharp as a blade, landing with such precision that Blake froze. "And I understand that this isn't the first time you've acted this way. My firm has received complaints from 3 other individuals who had similar experiences at your dealership." As Marcus continued, memories of his childhood surged in his mind. He remembered his mother tirelessly working to build an empire from nothing. Those nights when she'd come home exhausted but still took time to help him with his homework and teach him about resilience and integrity. "My mother didn't just teach me how to succeed in business," Marcus said, his voice firm, his icy gaze locked on Blake. "She taught me to use that success to make a difference. And today, you will learn a memorable lesson about that difference." Blake's face turned pale, his words faltering as Marcus confirmed, "Yes, my mother, Victoria Bennett, has decided to purchase a significant stake in the parent company of Elite Motors starting this morning." Marcus smiled, a calm yet sharp grin that reminded Blake of his mother just the week before. "My mother always taught me to invest wisely," he continued. "It's surprising what you can achieve with the right strategy and a little patience." Blake slumped into his leather chair, his smug grin replaced by an unsettling silence. The awards on the wall, once a testament to his success, now seemed to mock him, reminders of a career built on prejudice and privilege that was rapidly collapsing. "The board will be in touch with you soon regarding this matter," Marcus went on, adjusting his cufflinks, his tone cold yet composed. "My mother taught me that when delivering important news, you should look someone in the eye so they can truly feel it. I'm here to remind you of that lesson." Blake trembled, trying to justify himself. "Mr. Marcus, surely there's something we can do. I never meant for this to happen." But Marcus raised his hand, signaling Blake to stop. "The time for excuses is over, Mr. Thompson. Now, you should prepare to face the board and the courts. I suggest you take this time to reflect on how you've run your business. Perhaps you'll learn something valuable from this situation." As Marcus turned to leave, he paused at the door, offering a slight smile. "Oh, and my mother decided to buy her Aston Martin from your competitor's dealership. They're much more pleasant. In fact, she bought 2, one for herself and one for me. Sometimes, we'll drive by here just to take in the view." The door clicked shut, leaving Blake Thompson alone with his bitter regret. His own laughter from the previous week echoed in his mind. Cold, hollow, a stark reminder of how swiftly the wheel of justice turns when it arrives unexpectedly. A few days later, the story of Victoria Bennett's experience at Elite Motors spread, sparking a national conversation about racial discrimination in high-end retail environments. Victoria received an outpouring of supportive messages from others who had faced similar discrimination but lacked the resources to fight back. Inspired by this moment, Victoria and Marcus established a legal fund for victims of racial discrimination in the consumer space, using the Elite Motors case to raise awareness and fund initiatives for change. Under pressure from Bennett Financial Group and the media crisis, Elite Motors underwent a comprehensive overhaul. The board implemented drastic measures. All employees were required to undergo diversity and inclusion training. Hiring practices were revised to increase diversity, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination was enacted. Blake Thompson was stripped of his ownership and faced a series of lawsuits, forced to take responsibility for his actions. Watching the collapse of the empire he had once prided himself on, he began to understand the true cost of prejudice, not just financially, but in lost opportunities and the people he had unknowingly harmed along the way. Victoria, in her new Aston Martin, smiled as she drove past Elite Motors one last time, the smooth purr of the engine sounding like a victory song. She had taught her son not only about business and the law, but about something far more important, justice. And sometimes, The sweetest revenge is simply letting someone witness the consequences of their own actions. This story reminds us that discrimination and prejudice can exist in any environment, even in places where fairness should be a given. If you've ever experienced discrimination, how did you handle it? If you were in Victoria Bennett's shoes, how would you pursue justice? Share your story in the comments below. Thank you so much for your continued support of the channel. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. During the content creation process, there may have been some small mistakes, and we hope you'll kindly overlook them. Wishing everyone happiness, peace, and good health in life. Stay tuned for more.